Friends, this morning, this last Sunday in our sermon series exploring what it means to have less and do more, I want to invite you to think about what it means to make sound. We will think together this morning about depletion and distraction, about pressure and about apathy. But first, I want to tell you about a radically devout follower, not of Jesus, but of the one called Buddha. This follower practiced constantly sitting meditation and walking meditation. He sat for so long that when he stood, his knees cracked and his ankles ached. He practiced mindful walking so much that the soles of his feet bled. His name was Sona, and he was determined, fiercely determined, to realize liberation. But in the course of his practice, he began to lose heart. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how much he pushed, no matter how tirelessly he did the work, the liberation he sought just wouldn't come. And so, at some point, according to Buddhist scriptures, Sona started thinking about giving up. He started to despair and to doubt. He started to grow dispirited and distracted, and he started to think that maybe he should just quit. What was it all for? He began to wonder. All this practice and effort and pushing, it would be so much easier, he began to think, to just give up and go back to living in ignorance. Maybe I just need to let go and drift through the world blissfully caught up in the silly foibles of everyday life, blissfully exempt from the work of liberation. According to Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha actually heard this follower's private thoughts and appeared to him and said, "Hey, Sona, what you thinking about?" Sona was caught off guard and admitted that he was ready to give up. The Buddha knew that Sona was a skilled musician, a man who played some version of an ancient guitar. So the Buddha said, "When you play, Sona, what happens if you tune the strings too tightly?" Sona replied, "They break." "Correct," the Buddha said. And he went on, "What happens if you tune your strings too loosely?" Sona replied, "They cannot make a sound." Then the Buddha said, "This, dear friend, is the way. We cannot move through life so tight we might break. And we cannot move through life so loose we are silent. We must tune ourselves, our work, our practice, our being the right way." Friends, it strikes me that there are forces afoot right now trying to tune us. There are forces trying to stress us and tax us and tease us and tense us into growing so tight that we break. And two, these same forces are trying to overwhelm us, to tune and turn us toward despair, toward giving in, toward giving up, toward ignorance, apathy, and cynicism. So many of us right now are just like Sona, determined, tired, and wondering if we can keep it all up. Keep up the aching knees and the bleeding feet. Keep up the political engagement or the marriage counseling or the chemo treatments. Keep up the job. Keep up sobriety. Keep up the self-care. Keep up the hope and the effort and the focus on liberation. And two, so many of us right now are wondering what the point of it all really is. Tired and depleted, we are looking at our couches and our Netflix and at all our favorite forms of distraction, and they are all looking real good right about now. This is the spectrum on which so many of us find ourselves. Tension and tightness so intense that it threatens to break us on the one hand, and on the other, laxity and distraction so desperate and deep that we don't even want to talk. I'm right there. There are times when I start the doom scrolling with determination, reading headlines and chasing down info and sifting through analyses of this executive order or that one. And I can feel it. I can feel the tension in my shoulder blades. I can sense the shortness in my temper. I can detect the edginess in my interactions. And then, at other times, all I want to do is coast into ignorance. I want to turn off the news and soak up an endless stream of reruns of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I think to myself, if I get one more unsolicited email from some goodwill activist trying to tell me what else I need to worry about, I'm going to scream. So tight, I might break. So loose, I don't speak. I only watch, or sleep, or eat, or chat about anything but the stresses of the day. Maybe that's just how life is sometimes. Maybe there are moments when all we can do is swing from one extreme to the other. However, though, people since ever, it seems, or at least for thousands of years, have wrestled with just this question. How do we show up and be present in a way that is sustainable, a way that has volume and melody and maybe even harmony? How do we, in times like these, speak up and sing out and make noises that matter? Or, to put it in a slightly different way, how do we show up and keep doing what we're doing when the world around us has changed? How do we keep acting with integrity? Or, as some of us might be asking ourselves, how do I keep following God's call? Or some of us might be asking ourselves, how do I keep serving others and taking care of the kids or the grandkids? How do I keep doing my job or keep up my protest? How do I keep making 40,000 extra square feet in my church keep on working? How do I continue to perform at the same level, in the same way, to the same degree? How do I keep doing what I've been doing when everything else around me is changing? Well, if Sona's ancient guitar offers any insight, you don't. People who play stringed instruments know that when you go to tune it, there are nearly countless factors to consider. You have to think about humidity. You have to think about temperature. You have to think about the age of the instrument. You have to think about a whole variety of contextual factors that will shape how your instrument responds to you. Tuning a guitar in cold weather is an entirely different affair from tuning a guitar in warm weather. Tuning a piano in the middle of a humid Memphis summer will require a different approach than tuning a piano in the middle of the Arizona heat. In other words, you can't keep doing what you're doing when everything else around you is changing. You've got to adapt. You've got to listen. You've got to respond with thoughtfulness and readiness and grace. This is what Jesus' ministry, friends, was really all about. Jesus did not set out to begin a new religion. Instead, he set out to tune his own. In the Good News according to Matthew, as is printed in your bulletin, Jesus proclaims, "Don't suppose for a minute that I have come to demolish the scriptures, either God's law or the prophets. I'm not here to demolish, but to complete. I'm going to put it all together, pull it all together in a vast panorama. God's law is more real and lasting than the stars in the sky and the ground at your feet. Long after stars burn out and the earth wears out, God's law will be alive and working. Trivialize even the smallest item in God's law, and you will only have trivialized yourself. But take it seriously, Show the way for others, and you will find honor in the kingdom. Unless you do far better than the Pharisees in the matters of right living, you won't know the first thing about entering the kingdom. In example after example in his lifetime, people challenged and chastised Jesus, suggesting that he was undoing the religious and spiritual norms of his day. And time again, Jesus would make clear that what he was doing, in fact, was looking around at the truth of his context and retuning ideas and retuning practices so that they could be more in line with the fullest extent and the truest intent of God's law as Jesus understood it. This, friends, this is the work we have inherited. As a community of followers of Jesus, a big part of what we do here, maybe truthfully the only thing we do here at church, is tune ourselves to the sound of God's law, the sound of a love and a power that has reverberated through eternity and still reverberates today. But what does God's law sound like? To be clear, it doesn't sound like rules. Following rules is just one among many ways that we tune ourselves. No, God's law actually sounds like holding the hands of people that no one wants around. God's law actually sounds like making space for strangers and immigrants that live on the margin. God's law actually sounds like Sabbath and deep rest. God's law actually sounds like love, boldly lived in contexts of hate. God's law sounds like justice that runs deeper than any regime or administration. God's law sounds like people doing what is right, even when it won't make the news or ever be noticed beyond you, your neighbor, and God herself. God's law is the way we are called to reverberate in the world. It is the sound we are called to make. And so, sometimes, to make holy sound, to reverberate in that divine register, we must adjust. Sometimes, in order to keep doing what we're doing, we have to rethink how we're doing it. Sometimes we need to tighten and to strive and to strain more than we usually do. And then other times, we need to loosen and let go and release more than we're used to. Sometimes, to reverberate through the world in the ways we are called, we have to tune and to retune in ways that are different, in ways that are new, in ways that might sometimes even make us feel uncomfortable. This is what Jesus was making clear in today's reading. He didn't come to abolish the law, but rather to help people hear it more clearly, to help people live it more loudly, to help folks find the holy tuning that will make of their lives a song for justice, a melody of meaning, a lyric of love. But in order to know which way we need to tune, in order to know if we need to tighten or let loose, we must constantly, honestly listen. We must ask ourselves if we're speaking at the right pitch, if we're communicating with the right timbre, if we're relating to the people we love in ways that support harmony. Or maybe we have to consider, are we so tight that we're snappy and edgy and giving anger to all the wrong people? In that same way, we have to consider whether we are relaxing and breathing and making space to keep on going, or perhaps are we ignoring? Are we checking out rather than checking in? Are we pushing out, pushing down, pushing past difficulty as a way to create the illusion of ease? This is the work of our moment, friends. In the coming years, you must remember that we all have to tune. You must remember the words of the poet Mary Oliver, who said, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting." And also, you must remember the words of the poet and activist Audre Lorde, who said, "When we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." First Congo, we were meant to make sound, to reverberate with and in and through and for a power and love that moves mountains and parts seas and overcomes empires. That is the sound that we are called to make. But we can't make that sound if we're tuned so tight we break, or if we've gone so loose we're silent. Whatever might be top of mind for you this morning, our politics, our climate, our church, your grief, that conflict, those finances, whatever it may be, there is a way forward. It might not look the way you're used to. It might not feel at all familiar, but you have the power, friends, to keep making sound if you honestly listen and then tune toward God. May it be so, and amen.